I'm James Turk of Gold Money. I'm here with Félix Marina de la Cova, contributor to the Gold Money website. Félix, I've got a question for you. We're getting a lot of people asking about this. What is the situation in Spain? How is it going to evolve? What are your thoughts?
Well, basically, James, we're heading off a cliff, and it looks right now like we're not slowing down. It's not enough to slow down a bit. They really have to change direction, and from what we've seen, they're not doing it. The Spanish fiscal situation, the fiscal gap, is almost 150 billion right now. I mean, you look at the numbers from 2011, and government income was about 110 billion, at all levels of government, and spending was about 264 billion in 2011. So the gap is huge. And if you look at the way that it's evolved in the past few years, since 2008 when the bubble popped, revenues have obviously dropped from a peak of almost 150 billion to around 110. And well, just to put this in perspective, Spanish GDP is around 1 trillion euros. Yeah. And on the other hand, spending has just not stopped going up. Since 2008, revenues have dropped by almost 30%. And expenditures have gone up by 30%. While companies, families, everybody has had to cut back, the government has just kept on spending more and more. Now they've announced cuts, but if you look at the cuts, they're mainly tax increases. 2/3 of the proposed tax are of the proposed cuts, in quotes, are tax increases, and that's just going to slow the economy more and more, and maybe impair revenues even more.
It's a horrific situation with unemployment 24%, youth unemployment 53%. And I always wondered, when Spain became part of the euro, Spain's natural ties, its commercial ties, are to Latin America, to the Western Hemisphere, more so than to the rest of Europe, aren't they? And therefore it seems more logical that you would look to the West rather than toward the East. And therefore, is it possible that Spain will pull out of the euro?
I don't think that's possible at all. I think there's many Spanish politicians and economists who pine for the peseta and said, if only we could leave the euro, we could devalue. But the fact is that they've invested all the political capital in the continuation of the euro. And the only way that Spain would pull out of the euro would be if it broke up or Germany pulled out and we saw a two-tier euro system. But that's a big argument that right now, for me, the most probable scenario is more centralisation in Brussels, both bank, financial, monetary, and basically the euro system trying to bail out all the periphery countries, including Spain, Italy, and even France, I would say.
But that's not solving anything. And we're seeing here in Madrid today spontaneous demonstrations again. And isn't the social tension going to continue to heighten and become more apparent as the economic conditions continue to deteriorate?
Of course. I mean, as long as the fiscal gap is not closed, as long as the budget is not balanced, money is going to keep flowing out. And as long as there's a full-on capital flight from Spain, with obviously stops and ups and downs as bailouts are announced and so on, but as long as capital continues to fly from Spain, the situation is going to deteriorate. And the only thing that could really stop it would be a drastic, credible move to balance the budget. There is such a lack of solvent countries and fiscally responsible countries in Europe that investors would love to go to a country that said, I'm going to balance the budget in 2 years. They would flock to that country. Yeah. But right now, that's not even it's not even within the announced targets for the next 10 years.
But the capital is continuing to flee. I mean, the Spanish banks have lost something like a few hundred billion of deposits, which they're filling the gap on the balance sheet by borrowing from the central bank. I think they're taking down 370 billion from the central bank, just the Spanish banks in their lending programs, just to keep their heads above water without contracting their balance sheets at all. So something, I guess what I'm getting at is something has to give. Is it going to be ultimately the currency's going to give? I just don't see the politicians balancing the budget or cutting expenses. I don't think the people want that. In fact, the people want more spending and less austerity. That's what these demonstrations are about.
The sad thing is that it's not, obviously there's no political will to save ourselves in Spain.
So what's going to give?
we're going to depend on what they tell us from Germany and Brussels. That's what's going to happen.
But the Spanish people...
the ECB and the European Commission are going to mark the tune. And what does the ECB and the European Commission want? They're going to impose reforms which are going to be done, they're going to be carried out in Spain with a very sort of politicians are going to say we do this because they tell us to, without any real will to carry them out, but they're going to have to. They're going to do it too slowly. They're never going to actually balance the budget. They're just going to try and cut a bit more each year, which is just going to perpetuate the vicious circle. The only thing that could really bring us out would be a drastic change of direction, and I don't see it happening.
Okay, well, thank you, Felix. What I'd like to do, since you live right here in Madrid, if you could continue to watch the situation, and if there's something you want to share with Gold Money viewers, please let me know, and we'll do a podcast or another video on a moment's notice if you think there's something important. Because obviously Spain is of critical importance to the future of the euro and the whole European community. So I appreciate any guidance or insight that you might give us in the future.
I'd love to, James.
Thank you, Felix.